So I'll tell you the next time
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. So, God willing, I'm going to try to give an overview at the beginning of like what this program is about and what was our motivation of wanting to create it, what is our goals for it, and what we hope to get out of it. And then we're going to go into the first topic, which kind of the primary aim, at least, of like the educational component of the ARK is about parenting, because we all kind of, obviously, anyone who is here is a parent, because we have our kids here as well. And a lot of times we struggle with different things of how to raise them, especially in our society, how to teach them about the church, about Christianity, about Orthodoxy, and at the same time, they're still living in the world. We're not isolating ourselves from the world, but at the same time, like, how do we keep our kids pure and educated and so on? So first, I'm going to be speaking about kind of the purpose, right? So there's a dual purpose of this program. Part of the purpose is related to the kids themselves, and part of the purpose is related to the parents, we as parents, okay? As far as the kids, obviously, we wanted to teach them godly principles, a lot, very, very similar to like the youth academy, like Sunday school. We're wanting to teach them godly principles and giving them more of an opportunity to do so in a setting like this, rather than just in the classes on Sundays only. But also we want them to build relationships with one another, because this is important. If they have good, strong friendships with one another and they grow up kind of with each other at this age, then as they get older, they can continue those friendships and already have like this bond. Because a lot of, the function of the church is that we find our social life, we find our fellowship, we find all of this among people who are like-minded and people who have the same values as us. And we find that by, spending time together. Also, it helps the kids to also develop a deeper bond with their servants. So beyond just the 1 hour a week that they spend with the servants, now there's another opportunity that they have to spend time with the servants and to kind of connect with them. Because a lot of times, and maybe not at this age, but a lot of times when they get a little older, if they've already developed like a strong bond with somebody from church, they might actually go to them and ask them for advice about things, maybe for things that they would feel embarrassed to come to us as parents about. They would feel more comfortable to go to a servant. So if there's someone who is serving our children they're very close to our children, then this will help them. Maybe they'll go to them, give them advice, and so on. I mean, I remember when I was a servant, there would be times where people would come and they would ask me things that were very serious, and they didn't go to their parents to talk about it, right? So the more opportunity that we develop friendships between our kids and the servants, it gives them more opportunities to kind of go to them for advice and, tap into their experience and so on. And again, like I said, it gives our kids more time to spend in just a godly environment. A lot of times, activities and things that we do for our kids, it's good, but a lot of times it's out maybe doing something where they could be exposed to something negative, and we know our kids are very impressionable at this age, and we want them to kind of learn godly things. We want them to be used to coming to church. We want our kids to be used to the idea of, I come to church all the time. Like, church is not just, I'm going to go on Sunday for a few hours and then I go home and that's it. I want to develop the idea that I want to go to church. I want to meet my friends there. I want to attend Bible studies there. I want to do like Sunday school related activities there, and so on. So for the kids, there's a lot of benefit for a program like this. But there's also a benefit for the parents, which is why there's kind of like two parallel purposes for this program, okay? Like I said, one of the purposes of involving the parents in a program like this is to give them the opportunity also to learn about an Orthodox perspective on parenting. Okay, how is it that we can teach our children the values that we have, the faith that we have, and so on. And also to give knowledge and also resources to protect our children. Like, sometimes there are very good resources out there of people that have already gone through this, people with experience raising their kids in our society and so on. And there's books and there's other materials and things like that that maybe we can tap into to get more knowledge and more kind of resources to help us as parents. Also, it helps us develop fellowship among us, right, among the parents, because we want our kids to, yes, be friends with one another, but we also want to strengthen our ties with one another. A lot of times, especially when somebody new comes to the church and they don't know anyone, they have a hard time, connecting and being engaged with other people from the church, because by nature, sometimes people just like to stay within their group of friends that they have. So for those who have been in the church all their lives, maybe they already have this vast network of people that they, see as friends and they like to spend time with, and they go visit them and so on. And even their kids maybe, know each other. But we are a church that's wanting to promote people from the outside to come and join the church, and to feel not that they're just joining because they share the faith, but that they feel like from the very beginning that they're accepted. And accepted doesn't just mean I don't give you bad looks when you walk into the church. It means I'm accepted as in I'm treated like everyone else. I'm able to be accepted in these social groups. I'm able to participate in these social activities. But if we're honest with ourselves, a lot of times when we're thinking about having people over to our house, or we're thinking about, having some kind of social function, we usually think about those people that we already know very well, and those are the people I'm going to go to and invite them. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but I am saying that it'd be good to expand that group and say, you know what, I want to develop friendships with more people, not just for our own benefit, but for the benefit also of those people. Like, we're wanting them to be integrated into the church. So a big part of this program, and one of the goals of it, is to develop kind of friendships and support system in between members of the church that are all at kind of the same level in their life. All of you here have pre-K kids. So maybe you're not all exactly identical in your age or your experience or where you live or any of that, but you have something in common, and that is the desire to raise your kids in a godly way. So part of the purpose of this program is to give everyone the opportunity to join together, to meet each other, to develop those friendships, to be able to have those relationships go beyond just the church and go out. Maybe I'm going to start asking about you. Maybe I'm going to invite you to my house. Maybe I'm going to do this. So part of this program is about promoting that idea of fellowship. Also, the idea of the support system is that, sometimes I need help. Sometimes I need advice. Sometimes I have a problem. And maybe there's another parent that's gone through a similar situation with their kids, and they, can give me their perspective. Okay, this is what's worked for me. This is what hasn't worked for me. So it gives us a support system to be able to call in each other and say, hey, I have this problem. What do you think? Or even if it's a problem that people don't know the answer to, maybe you can make a suggestion and we can address it in a format like this. Or this is something that we talk about openly, to discuss issues and to know kind of what it is that we're all suffering from. And that helps us to kind of see that we're not alone. When I go and visit a lot of people, the thing that they want to know is everybody's kids like this, or is it just my kids? I get that question a lot. Is this normal that my kids are doing this, that my kids are hyper, that my kids are disobedient, that my kids are stubborn? Is this normal? And the answer is yes, this is normal. And everybody's kids go through this. Your kids are not unique and different than any of the others. Of course, there's different personalities and so on. But this support system helps us to serve our kids better, because we're tapping into the experience of everyone and not just being by myself guessing, okay, am I doing the right thing or am I not doing the right thing? Finally, it fosters relationships between the three groups that we've mentioned: the kids, the parents, and the servants. Right? This gives you an opportunity to spend time with your kids. There's going to be time for playing games and things with kids, and also to spend more time with the servants, to interact with them. So again, it deepens the bond and the kind of the friendships and the communication between all of us together, and me included in that, so that we can all kind of feel like we're a family. Because that's what this is about. That's what a church is supposed to be. It's supposed to be, this is a family of people coming together with the same values, with the same goals, with the same beliefs, and we serve each other, we help each other, we show love to one another, right? So being in kind of a program like this helps us all to know each other better and to help us be stronger in our walk with Christ. Any questions or comments so far? So, God willing, in the next however many months that we're going to be focusing, we're going to be doing this program. So as you know, this is the first one. We're going to be focusing on a book called Parenting Toward the Kingdom, Orthodox Christian Principles of Child Rearing. Okay, and this book is written by an Orthodox person who's an expert in parenting, and actually he goes around and does different conferences and things. He just gave a conference actually in Orlando in one of the Coptic churches. a parenting conference there. So if you're interested in getting more information about this or buying the book, here is the link where you can buy the book. It's called Parenting for the Kingdom, Christian Principles of Child Rearing by Philip Mamalakis. That's his name. Okay. So again, he's Greek Orthodox. He has a lot of experience in parenting, and he has many, many kids himself. And when you read the book, you'll find that a lot of the stuff he's speaking about is stuff that we've all experienced, and very simple things. But the principles behind what it is that he's talking about is very powerful and very good, and I think eye-opening maybe to a lot of us. Think, what is my role as a parent? You know, what is it is this that's expected of me, and what's not expected of me? Okay. So God willing, today we're going to start kind of in this book and studying this book. We're going to look just at the first chapter. So the way I have this structured is all this is going to be is a sequence of questions. Okay, this is going to be 100% discussion. I just have like a sequence of questions, and then after we've kind of discussed it, I'm going to kind of give you my input and what the book is speaking about. Okay, what the book is speaking about in like what do we, from his perspective, what is our role? What is it that we should do? Okay.
It's also available on Audible.
Okay, yeah. So if you want to get the audiobook, you can get it this way. Okay, so this is a very easy question. What is the goal of parenting? Okay, what is the goal of parenting? So this is for you guys to speak out of it. It's not carry the family name? you just want your DNA to continue.
Just to raise our kids and with godly fear and Christian morals.
So we want our kids to have a godly fear and Christian morals. Okay, good.
Responsible individuals in society.
We want them to be responsible, right? So here you're speaking about like we want to cultivate in them a strong relationship with God, and here you're saying, but they also have to be responsible members of society, and then their relationship with everyone else also has to be strong, right? We don't want them to be selfish. We don't want them to be just self-serving in themselves and so on. Okay, good. What else?
To be accepted into the kingdom.
So we want their salvation, right? We want their salvation. So, which is very important, obviously, right? We want God to look favorably on them. And also part of that is God looks to us, right? Because he says, what I've given you, like we are the stewards of these children, right? God has given them to us and say, I've given them to you for this time, to raise them, right? Because God loves our children more than we love them. Right, and so he's saying, "I'm giving them to you. You raise them in godly fear, so that they will, have salvation." Now, of course, we know every human has free will, and they can choose to depart and go whatever direction. Right, so we're not like 100% responsible for what choices our children make, but at the same time, we have a huge impact and influence on them. Okay, good, salvation. What else? Any other comments?
To be able to understand God's will for their purpose behind it. Like everybody, I feel, has a spiritual gift or a talent. And so to help them identify that.
Okay, good. So to be able to know what is their purpose, right? And to receive that purpose from God, because some people live many, many, many years, or maybe even into adulthood, and they don't know what that purpose is, and they don't know what it is that they should be doing, okay? We can help them to discover that. Good. Anything else?
I can say that lead them in life in a perfect way, in all aspects of living, in a godly way, in a society way, with less mistakes than we had it ourselves in the past.
Okay, good. So we are taking our own experiences, which our children never appreciate. We're taking our own experiences and we'll tell them, hey, we already made mistakes. We already know that maybe some of these decisions that you're wanting to make are not right because we've made those bad mistakes and we don't want you to repeat those bad mistakes that we made. So we are using our experience to help us and them to not go down a path that might lead them into trouble or pain. Okay, good. Any other comments? Okay, I'm going to read for you something St. Clement of Alexandria says. He says, the primary lesson for life must be implanted in the soul from the earliest age. The primary lesson for children is to know the eternal God, the one who gives everlasting life. So he's saying what? Like this is the primary lesson for our children, is that we want to teach them to know God, the one who gives everlasting life. Okay? One of the things that he focuses on in this chapter is that we have to always focus on the long term. Right? Long term. Like I think everything that everybody said here was very long term. Okay, relationship with God, relationship with society, doing everything right and learning from our mistakes, like all these things are very, very long term. So we have to ask ourselves are our actions, maybe this is my goal, this is what I want. Are my actions supporting that goal or not? Are my actions supporting the idea that I have these long-term goals? Or are my actions actually maybe leading me to different goals or to different outcomes that I don't realize? Okay, this is a quote from the book. He says, parenting is not about getting children to behave. Although that's a tempting short-term goal, our long-term goal is to raise up children who understand themselves as children of God, who live their whole lives according to his commandments. So let me read it again. Parenting is not about getting children to behave, although that's a tempting short-term goal. Our long-term goal is to raise up children who understand themselves as children of God, who live their whole lives according to his commandments. Okay? How do we understand this? How do we understand this? Why is he speaking about getting our children to behave is a short-term goal, but that's not what parenting is about?
We get so stuck in today. Like, the goal of the day, short-term goals, but it's harder to think of long-term goals for your kids.
So what are some, when he's speaking about getting our children to behave, so why is that a short-term goal and not a long-term goal? Because we're just talking about we want our children to be responsible, we want our children to make good choices, we want our children to do everything. So why isn't getting our children to behave in line with our long-term goals?
I think it is a line. I mean, maybe just because, behavior is a part of the long-term goal as well.
Okay.
Is it not?
So what he's saying is, sometimes as parents, we care about the action more than the process by which I decide upon the action that I'm going to take. So for instance, like if my kid is going crazy and jumping up on the table and making a mess or doing whatever, right? As a parent, sometimes in that moment, because I'm angry about what's happening, what I focus on is I just want this action to stop, right? And maybe even my response to my children in that moment is angry or yelling at them, doing whatever, because all I want is this action to stop because this is a wrong action, right? So, but what he's saying is in those moments of disobedience, and actually he makes a comment in the book. He says the times when our children are disobedient are the most effective parenting opportunities. Okay? So how I react to my children when they are disobeying is like that's the most critical thing. So am I focusing more on I want to instill in my children the values and the things necessary to teach them that this is not correct action, this is not correct behavior, or am I focusing more on the behavior itself and just trying to stop it by whatever means?
I think it's two different things though. When how you handle the situation when your kid's misbehaving, how you handle it could get you to the long-term goal. And if you handle it, abruptly or by yelling or whatever, then that's kind of short-term, short-minded and short-sighted.
Mm-hmm.
But if you handle it differently, it can kind of get you towards that long-term goal as well.
Yes.
Different question.
I mean, he's not trying to say that our children's behavior is irrelevant, but sometimes we make the behavior as the number one goal. So for instance, like you can imagine like a very, very stern parent that whenever their children do anything wrong, he comes down on them like like really, really strict and just shuts them down, right? So maybe in the end, the child ends up behaving because they're scared of their dad. They're scared of their parent. They're scared of the consequence. But it's not because they want to choose to do good. It's not because their brain, their mind has the right mindset. It's because they're just afraid of consequence. And so what happens is when the kid gets out of college or goes to college, lives off on their own, where their parents are no longer like a strong influence on them, then they have freedom, right? And that's when you see like all this stuff start to happen that they do because they don't have their parents there anymore to be that, very strict. So sometimes as parents, we think that we're doing our job because when we look at our kids' behavior, we say, well, my kid is behaving. My kid is behaving well, right? But maybe the reason they're behaving is not the right reason. And that's a critical point of what he's saying in this chapter of think of the long term. The long term meaning my child is an adult or an adolescent, and I'm not there to tell him what to do, and I'm not there to punish him when he doesn't do it. I'm not there to tell him right from wrong, but he himself knows right from wrong. He himself knows not to do the wrong things, right? Even if I'm not there to do anything, right? So I think that is the long-term goal, right? The long-term goal when we speak about godliness, when we speak about society, when we speak about all this, mean you are doing that without me, right? Because as parents, sometimes we don't want to let go of our kids, and we feel like, I'm there to control you. I'm there to tell you right from wrong. I'm telling you that every time you're going to make a wrong decision, I'm there to tell you, no, make this right decision. I'm going to force you to make the right decision because I know the decision you're making is wrong. So the point he's making is that really the right approach of parenting? Is the right approach of parenting to prevent you from making wrong choices? Or is my goal in parenting to teach you to make the right choices, so you have to taste the consequence of the wrong choices yourself to learn how to make decisions, And those are two different parenting styles completely. A lot of times people, and it's very normal for parents, because like you said, exactly, we have experience. We know that if you make this choice that you're going to be hurt in some way. You're not going to get the results you want in some way. So it's very tempting for us to just go in and say, I'm not going to even give you the permission to make this choice. I'm not going to let you make a wrong choice.
So you let him do the wrong choice, even though you know it's wrong?
Yes.
Yeah.
Here's the thing is, our children, thank God, especially Annie, pre-K age, the kind of wrong choices they're going to make are not going to end the world.
I mean,
Yeah, like, so when you teach your kids like these principles at such a young age, then the maximum consequence that they would have by making wrong choices is very limited.
When you say pre-K and you say behaving in the same sentence, doesn't make sense.
But when I refer to I deal with that, I will not let them to go to the mistakes and do it. But if you're gonna feel like he's doing something wrong, you're gonna initiate. That's not good because of what, and you let him do it's on his own.
At least give him your experience.
But you're gonna give him the experience and then let him to choose. And when he gonna feel the mistake and the taste of the consequences.
Yes.
And then he gonna remember, Mama said or Papa said to me, don't do that.
Exactly.
So next time, maybe I have to get attention to what they say.
Yeah, I'm not saying that we don't tell them what is right and wrong. What I'm saying is we don't force them to do what we say is right. And when you think about it, this is exactly what God did with Adam and Eve. He told them, if you eat of this tree, you will die, right? But when they came to eat, he didn't jump in and say, well, no, I'm not going to let you, right? He said, okay, I gave you the choice and I told you what was right. And if you choose what is wrong, then you will have to suffer the consequence of what is wrong, even though in this case, this consequence was the worst consequence of any consequence ever. Like there was no other consequence as bad as this, and yet God allowed his children whom he loved to suffer this, because if he had only every time they came to make a wrong choice saved them from it, then they could have never learned to do right. Right? So this is a very important concept in the book. Okay. What are some things that we as parents do that hinder us from achieving this goal? These goals that we set at the beginning. What are some things that maybe we do that hinder us from achieving this goal, these goals that we set? So we spoke about one already, which is jumping in and preventing our kids from making wrong choices all the time. Okay? What else?
Distractions.
Okay?
Everyday distractions.
Like
media,
what?
work, or people.
Where the parents are distracted.
Parents are distracted.
Okay, so sometimes we as parents, again, it's a fight between the long term and the short term. The short term goal is, I'm really busy today. I just want you to be quiet and to be entertained. So I'm going to give you the iPad and you're going to watch movies for several hours because I don't have the time to deal with you. So in my day, I'm thinking, today was a good day. My kids were not very, my kids were not crazy. They didn't jump up and down and do all of this. Everything was pretty calm and so I think of myself as, this was a good day. It was good. My kids were good. Okay. But I have to ask myself was the actions of today, even though they might have been calm and peaceful, were they supporting my long-term goal of teaching my children all these godly things? Well, maybe the answer is no. Right?
But it still was the best hour of the day.
Yeah, but it still felt really good. So that's very deceiving, right? So maybe I'm distracted and I'm busy and I have so much stuff. And as a parent, I don't have time to invest in teaching my children all this stuff, because to teach my children all this stuff requires obviously a lot of time and patience and energy and consistency and all of that. And it's much easier for me as a parent just to say, here, watch this movie. If they don't watch the movie and instead they sit there making a lot of mistakes and I'm having to correct them all the time and I'm having to invest all this time, by the end of the day, I feel like maybe exhausted and feeling like, well, my kids they're not listening and they're not doing this. And I might actually feel worse, because I'm always fighting with them. I'm always wanting them to do something that they don't want to do. And I might feel worse. Which is why we always resort to the things that they just it causes them to be like numbing their mind and just sitting there doing something without thinking, because it's easier. It's easier for everybody. Okay. What else?
Impressing sometimes.
The what?
That you feel impressing in the crowd of people. Sometimes it's stop you from achieving your
impressing?
goal. Impressing.
Who are you impressing? Embarrassing. Embarrassing. Yeah. Yeah, and actually, the book talks about this too. Sometimes we as parents, our reaction to our children's behavior is because we don't want them to embarrass us in front of other people, right? So sometimes when I am embarrassed because of the actions of my kids, I overreact to what they're doing because I'm just so embarrassed that my kid is doing this in public. Like my mom always used to tell me that, whenever I would want to get something from her, that I would go in public and I would have a tantrum, because then it's more likely that I'm going to get what I want, because she just wants to give it so to quiet me down. She'll just give me what I want, right? Maybe we do this, right? Especially when our kids are in a public place where maybe they're in the middle of the liturgy and, I'm going to stop the liturgy if I hear your kids crying. So that's the time where I'm going to be loud and whatever, because I know that if I'm loud at this time, that I'm going to get what I want. Or our reaction to our kids in those moments are way over the top because we are embarrassed. Okay. So again, in order to support our long-term goals, I should not expect that my children are there to be impressive to other people, or that I should not feel embarrassed or judge my children for what it is that they're doing, even if it's happening at the wrong time. My goal is to teach them the right thing to do, regardless of whether other people are watching or not watching, right? So sometimes I overreact whenever my children are embarrassing me, and that can also have a negative impact because I don't teach them the principles. At that point, again, I'm just trying to shut them down.
That's not the reality. Like you under stress sometimes, like when a crowd, like in the church, liturgy, when the kids do that, and especially even when you stop, actually something is like you increase the tone of the kids. So if you keep continuing, maybe she can manage it until she's going out. But when you stop, actually you embarrass them.
There's a difference.
It's big more like when she go out, she go crazy on him because everybody and she feel like everybody look at her and
But there is a difference between stopping the wrong action. There's a
don't mean you, but
First of all, I just want to say that whenever I hear babies crying or whatever, I have no idea who it is. Yeah. So I'm not singling out.
Most of the time you do it.
So see that at least that's fair then. I'm fair. I'm not trying to.
When there is nobody is saying anything in the background in the liturgy too, They start, even if they were silent, they start speaking.
Yeah. So all I'm saying is there's a difference between trying to deal with the situation. So obviously, like if your child is crying in the liturgy and they're making a disturbance, okay, you take them to the cry room, you take them out, and you do that quickly. I'm not saying that in that moment you're gonna say, okay, let me teach you the principles of life. No. Yeah. But when you go out, don't let whatever this feeling of embarrassment or whatever dictate you the way that you deal with your child, because it's not going to have a positive effect. Again, is my goal to just get my child to behave in the moment, or do I have a longer term goal, okay, where I'm teaching my child why is it that we should stay quiet, and why is it that, so that's an important thing.
And just to comment on that, there's a term saying that it takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that's part of the village.
Yeah.
Is the structure of, teaching obedience.
Yeah.
And to add another comment, I think it's very, very important, because when I start being a parent and having my kid go to, I don't know, McDonald's or playground area, and when they don't behave, treating them sometimes and thinking, what are people thinking of me treating them that way or fixing the problem? Well, that's totally wrong, because you're trying to please the people around you, but you're not acting like your children. Just block it off and just.
For me, I'm blocking off. I'm talking generally, like everybody else. I don't care about people. I'm not. But I'm just looking. If somebody's stopping the goal, sometimes that's one of the reasons to stop some parents from achieving the goal.
Good. Any other comments about this? Some things that hinder us from achieving the goal?
I think both parents also have to address the issue in the same manner and not confuse the children. Like one says it's okay, the other one says no.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So sometimes, and I'm sure it happens in all households, like, the kids know if I go to this specific parent, I'm going to get what I want.
Yeah.
And so they know which parent to go to for different things. And so, one, obviously that shouldn't happen. Two, the parents shouldn't be arguing about these, like when they're going to make a decision about something, they shouldn't be arguing about it in front of the kids, right? They need to discuss it, separately, and then they come with like a unified decision so that the kids see that the parents are one. It's not like that we're divided, in this, right? Even though there might be division, not everyone is going to have the same opinion. And maybe even if we all agree about these principles, but maybe in practice, the way we apply the principles is not going to be the same. And I'm not trying to say that there is one way of applying these principles. Everyone is different, parents are different, kids are different. What works with one child might not work with another child, okay? But what I'm saying is that these should be the principles that are like the foundation of all the choices that we make when dealing with our children. And so when the two parents are presented with some decisions to make, they should discuss it. Now obviously after experience in raising children, the parents are going to know what the other person thinks about certain things, so they will be able to make a decision without necessarily going to consult the other one, right? So like I know, for instance, that my wife, if she's going to say a certain thing and I agree with her, so I'm just going to give the child the answer now, no or yes, okay? But for some things that might be vague and you don't know, you can say, okay, well, I'm going to talk to dad or mom, and then I will let you know, And then that way, at that point on, both the parents are always going to say the same thing, and that makes things a lot easier. Good. Anything else?
Not having enough patience. I think you mentioned it, but I think this is a big thing, because sometimes we just don't have the patience to deal with it. With our lifestyle and how busy we are. Take this, do this, or take this, play with it. And instead of dealing with the problem, just praying about having more patience. I think that's very, very
good. And I think patience, and this is also mentioned in the book, patience comes in two different kind of ways. So one way we think of patience is, I don't want to lose my temper, right? Like maybe, especially for those who have more than one kid or even more than two kids, and it becomes more difficult, right? Because you have several things happening at the same time, and maybe you yourself like are upset because something unrelated to your kids or at work or wherever. So in those times where you're kind of like vulnerable to losing your temper, obviously you have to be very calm, and maybe when we are tempted to lose our temper, our response should be, I'm going to do nothing right now. I'm not going to correct you right now. I'm not in the state of mind where I can correct you or I can say anything, and I'm just going to stop and take a break, and then I'm going to come back later and address whatever it is that happened, as opposed to trying to do it in the moment. That's one kind of patience, right? He speaks about another kind of patience, which is essentially consistency. Patience as consistency. Meaning, sometimes we set a rule in the house and we tell our kids, this is the rule, and they start breaking the rule. And they break it and they break it. And maybe at the beginning, every time they break it, we're like, didn't we say we're not going to do this? And we correct it. And then the second time and the third time and the 20th time, at some point, we've lost the patience of correcting. We've lost the patience of saying it. So one response might be the losing of the temper. The other response might be, I just kind of give up. I'm not going to even try anymore because I've tried it and it hasn't worked. They won, essentially, right? The danger with that is once they realize that they can win, then it's going to keep happening because they understand that they can win, right? And instead of them kind of, being forced to follow the rules of the house, they're the ones that set the rules of the house, right? And so this is definitely something that can hinder us from parenting because we just give up. Also because we give up thinking my child is hopeless. My child is never going to obey. They are too hyper. They are too crazy. And this is why I think goes back again to like when I go and visit many families and they ask me this question, is my kids normal? Is it normal for them to do this? Do other kids do this? Right? So I think maybe because our experience with our kids sometimes is we're the ones seeing them more than anyone, and we're dealing with them more than anyone. So we see their behavior, we see their actions, and when we see other people, maybe we don't see all the like how other kids behave, right? Maybe we don't see I was visiting a family and their daughter, she was so calm, she barely did anything, she was sitting there, and they're like, she's like that because she's shy right now, but you should see her when she's not in front of people, or when, so maybe I'm making a judgment about my kids compared to other kids because I don't really see how other kids are acting in the privacy of their own home when no one else but their parents are there, okay? So we shouldn't give up and say, my kids are hopeless, my kids are a special case. Of course there can be special cases, right? But that's not the normal, that's not the majority, right? So I shouldn't give up and just say, there's nothing I can do. Remember, in the eyes of God, God has placed these children in our care to raise them, right? So even if in the end there is something about this child that hinders them from making good choices, right? That doesn't prevent me from giving up my role as the steward, right? I'm going to keep doing my role as the steward. And then whether or not they grow up to make good choices or bad choices, I can look at the way I've parented them, and in the end I say, I did my part. I did everything I could do, by the grace of God. And whatever choices or decisions they make, this is because this is their choice, not because this is what I taught them is good. Okay. That was a good point. What are some consequences of short-term parenting? Short-term parenting, meaning all I care about is to stop the bad behavior as fast as possible, and that's my goal in every time. What are some consequences of that?
I think the biggest one would be when they're on their own, they're not going to tend to do what we've been telling them to do because we're not around.
Good.
So it's better to, like you said, teach them the process and how to come up with the right decision or the right thing instead of enforcing it at the moment. And once they have the freedom, they're not going to do it for sure.
Good. So he says this in the book. He says, successful children are those who internalize the values and virtues of the kingdom of God, so that when they go away to college or get married, they live according to these values, not because we are watching or because we say so, but because they believe these things deeply in their hearts, right? So that's exactly right. When we focus so much on just, I'm going to force you by any means possible to stop the bad behavior, maybe I'm not actually teaching them to make those choices on their own. What else?
We would lose the friendship with them when you force them and they will just be obeying out of fear. then we'll lose the friendship. You'll never be able to convince them with anything in the future.
Good. So our children always have to see us as loving them, even if they don't like what we're doing, right? Because there's a big difference between they feel that we don't love them, we don't care about them, versus, yes, we love them and care about them, but they don't like our actions. They don't like us telling them to do the things they don't want to do, but they still see us as caring, right? So when we even when we explain, like the way we explain something, I want you to do this action, and this action is something they really, really don't want to do. Taking the time to explain why, like, why am I telling you to do this? I'm not telling you to do this because I hate you. Because they don't understand. They don't understand why. There is a bigger reason. Think about it, even the way that we deal with God, okay? So often when God allows something to happen in our lives, our response to him is anger. Our response to him is, we don't understand. Why are you doing this to me? He is like the parent who has an idea of why, a good reason why he is allowing this to happen, but we're not able to comprehend it. Just like children, we're not able to understand. We tell our children, oh, you have to wake up and go to school. I don't want to go to school. You don't understand that in, 15 years, or 20 years, you're going to have to go to work, and you're going to have a career, and you're going to have to be self-sufficient, and you're going to have to do all of that. You don't understand it, and there's nothing at all that we can do to make them fully understand what that means. So in the end, you have to go to school because this is important for you, okay? So as much as we can, we take the time to be gentle and kind and to explain and, even talk about ourselves. Like, when I was a kid, I also didn't want to go to school, but I was so happy that I went to school, and like all this, everything that we do to try to make them feel comfortable, to feel loved, right? But in the end, even after all that, if they're still not convinced, no, you have to go to school, right? So the way that we talk to them, right, has a big impact on their relationship with us, right? So if I'm speaking to them in a way that they still love me, they still think that I'm like looking out for their best interest, and not that I'm yelling and screaming and hitting things and breaking things and just like raising my voice like to such a high degree where they're just scared of me. Because when they get scared of me, again, short-term goal, they're going to maybe fall in line, they're going to do what we said, right? But that is definitely not the kind of relationship I want, and that's not the means by which I want to achieve, right, anything, right? Because it's just, it's not true. It looks like it's working, but it's really not working. Good. Anything else?
They could, once they're grown up, they could be vulnerable to adopt other values from other people because they don't have values instilled in them from the home.
Good. So someone else might instill different values in them because they haven't absorbed the values, right? All they've been doing is focusing on exterior actions, but not on like the interior, like, values. Good. Why is it easy to fall into the trap of short-term parenting? I think we've discussed this. So he says it's easy to slip into the temptation that children are another thing that we have to do, right? Right? Because we put it on, like we make a list mentally, here are all the things that I have to do today. And part of that is related to our children. I have to take my kids to school. I have to make them breakfast. I have to pick them up. I have to help them with their homework. I have to do like all this stuff, right? And we just think of them as another thing on the to-do list in addition to all the other stuff that we have to do. So because everything else on our to-do list tends to be more task-based, right? And we're just focusing on, I have to finish this task as much as possible, as fast as possible, as efficiently as possible. I start to think of my kids this way. They are just a task. There's something I have to do as efficiently as possible without taking the time maybe to invest in them as much, right? So he says they are just another thing we have to do, or that they get in the way of getting things done, particularly when they misbehave. While things do need to get done, children are not tasks to complete, but persons to love. And we love them by attending to them as we get things done. Love is not a series of tasks to complete. We were not created just to get things done, but for love, to learn to love and to be in relationships of love. So our relationship with our children should not just be about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, let's finish all the things and now you get into bed and now I can have peace. As tempting as that is for us as parents, our focus on each one of those things should be, I'm wanting to give love to my kids. I'm wanting them to feel loved in this thing that I'm doing, especially when they're misbehaving, right? Because that's maybe when like we have to be the most straining ourselves from responding to them in a bad way, that we continue to show them love in that. Now, that showing love doesn't mean that we're not strict. Doesn't mean that we don't give them consequences. It doesn't mean any of that. All it means is that everything is balanced, right? And I'm giving you a consequence that is, like applicable to the wrong that you did. I'm not overreacting, right? And I'm not at any time making you feel like I don't love you. What can we do to help reach the goal of long-term parenting?
Keep reminding ourselves with the goals.
Okay, keep reminding ourselves with the goals. Keep attending the ARK. Good. Like, all these parenting books and things that are available, sermons to listen to about parenting and lectures and conferences, like all this stuff is good because we need to keep hearing this. And again, I think when we all meet together and we talk with other parents, we realize that we're not alone. We all struggle in the same things, right? So by having that support system, we're able to better serve our children because we ourselves are being served. Because we don't want to just make everything a bit, like we're guessing. We're going through life guessing. Am I doing the right thing? Well, we see actually there's a huge amount of research and experience and books and all the stuff of people that have already gone through this and have kind of understood it. And especially when we look at it from a Christian perspective, right? Because, I think maybe like parents, when they become parents, they begin to understand like the relationship between God and us in a different way, right? Like when I became a parent, I began to see like how much God loves us even when we misbehave, even when we do wrong. Like if the things that our kids do were done by a stranger, I think probably we would like want them thrown in prison. We would call the police on these people that are acting this way toward us. But when it comes to from our children, it's so much easier to forgive. It's so much easier. Like just, some time passes and I don't even remember the thing that was done. I smile when I see my kids. I'm so happy. Like that's the kind of love that we have for our kids, and that's the kind of love that God has for us. That even when we sin and even when we do all these bad things, God still loves us. He didn't reject us. He doesn't look at us like strangers, right? And treats us like that, right? So that helps us and to remind ourselves of that all the time. God wants me to love my children just like He loves me. What else can we do to help the goal of long-term parenting?
Pray.
Praying, right? And praying like together would be great, like God is present in the house, like we are serving God together, and we are, like that is our goal. Like my goal, like we said at the beginning, is to raise godly children, not just to get through with the day. Because sometimes that's what my goal is just to get done with this day, and the next day is just to get done with that day, as opposed to like kind of seeing like we have this trajectory, we have this goal, and everything that I'm doing is to support that goal. Anything else?
I think we're always valuing the moment that we're in, during what is happening. I think that's very important because we focus on the right way of teaching them instead of just get it over with and have fun.
Yeah, live in the moment.
Live in the moment, appreciate it.
Even when the moments are difficult, like live in the moment. Good. I think having right expectations is very important. Because anything that we go into with wrong expectations, we become disappointed and our response to it is usually not good. But have right expectations. What is it that I'm going to expect of it's normal for my children to misbehave. It's normal for my children to, be rebellious. It's normal for them to push back. So I'm preparing myself ahead of time for these things. So when they happen, I'm not like thrown off by it. Okay? He says this in the book. He says, our children are not here to make our lives peaceful. Full, yes, but peaceful, not so much. The peace of Christ is an internal peace in the face of outward chaos. We need to seek Christ in order to acquire inward peace rather than expecting peace to come from our children's behaviors. Right? We don't expect that our children are going to cause our lives to be peaceful. Our peace should be coming internally from our relationship with Christ, not from our kids. Okay? Right? We need to seek Christ in order to acquire inward peace rather than expecting peace to come from our children's behaviors. Okay?
I was just gonna say, like, I don't know if you get to the long-term goal unless you have like some short-term, objectives you want to hit based on the age of your child. Like, I can't expect, a 3-year-old to act a certain way, but if he's like 8 or 9, I would have some expectations. So I don't know if you need to have like short-term goals that line up with the long-term strategy. Is maybe another way to think about it, because I don't think you just hope you get there. You have to do things in between to get to that long-term goal.
So what does everybody think about that?
I guess it's in line with what we're saying, that you have the right expectation at the right time. So the 3 or less, like you said, that your expectation is for a 3-year-old, and your expectation will keep increasing with your age or your intentional development. So I think it's in line. So
what kind of goals would you set, like for the different ages?
I think like, at a 3-year-old, I think we go back to the behavior part of it. I think it's important as well. That hey, we walk into church. There's some rules at church that there's no talking, there's no running, and we're still, because why are we like that at church? Is because we're in God's house and we're in the presence of God. Like tongue at the age of 3, I think is important. So then it still aligns with the long-term goal, but those are probably things that I should tell a 3-year-old, and not hopefully by the time they're 8, 9 years old, they understand that.
Yeah.
So I think, it's got to be like age appropriate. And actually as the child develops, you should have different things you're doing for whatever age that child is. So for on us, I think it's like, probably one of the reasons we're here is we, understand at what age what we should expect. So our expectations are aligned with whatever age our child is as well.
No, I agree with that. I would also say that, those kind of things differ a lot from child to child of what they're able to do. Like, I don't think there's a way to set kind of like a master plan that's then just going to apply in everybody. It's like by 3 you should be able to do this. By 4 you should be able to do this. It's just like physical development too. People grow at different speeds, and mental development, they learn at different speeds. So I think there definitely needs to be short-term goals, I think, that align with the long-term goals. But I think those goals should be primarily set by the parents that know their kids the best and they know what they're able to do. But at the same time, there shouldn't just be this idea of, my kids are fine the way they are. No, I'm trying to instill in them, and I'm trying to help them to grow. But there should also be goals for us as parents to say, okay, like I need to work on being more patient with my kids when it comes to this, or my response to them needs to be this. But I agree with you. Any long-term goal there has to be short-term goals that go with it. Yeah.
I think what Albert's trying to say is we train the kids, we keep the same principles established from early age, and we just train them at this age. They're going to behave well in the church, so are expecting better behavior in the future, and like listening to their servants. And so it's a continuous process of training from young age.
Yeah. Good. So it's still long term, but
yes.
I don't want to hope that hey, that long-term goal, it's hit or miss. I want to make sure I can kind of scale it or judge it or benchmark it as we progress.
Yeah. I think when he's speaking about the short-term goals, he's not saying don't make short-term goals that support the long-term goals. He's saying don't let your goal just be all I care about is that my children are going to behave by any means necessary now, and that's my whole goal. Yeah. Okay. What does it mean to be patient as a parent? I think we focused on that. He said, parenting requires patience, not the patience that puts up with inappropriate behavior, but the patience that intervenes effectively, repeatedly, as long as our child struggles, right? So he again, like we said, he's focusing on the idea that we as parents have to be very, very consistent. And even though we might get tired or bored of like making the same choices and saying the same thing over and over, like, no, stop doing this, but our consistency is going to eventually get our children to do it on their own without us having to tell them all the time. But if we say yes one time, if we say no one time and the next time we don't respond, our kids are going to get mixed messages. In the end, they know that they might get, even if it's 50% of the time, what it is that they want by breaking a rule, because we just don't respond. But if we respond consistently every time, then eventually they're going to learn that, and they're not going to push as much anymore. Okay. The other thing also is that we have to, like, as parents, like, not try to tackle everything at the same time, because maybe that's too difficult for us. So let's say we take one thing that we know is like a big issue in the house, like with our kids. And because by trying to spread ourselves out of being consistent to everything simultaneously, we sometimes dig for ourselves a hole because we put rules that we ourselves cannot enforce. You know, like we try to put so many rules and we put so many consequences, and sometimes even those consequences are just outrageous. You know, that we know that if we say this consequence and our kids break these rules, that we couldn't and won't ever do this consequence because it's just too bad or too, you know, unreasonable or too hard to implement consistently.
A great example of this actually is when you have, for us having two girls, when they fight, you tell them don't fight, share, don't yell at each other. But then when we lose our patience, we tend to yell at them sometimes. And it's kind of hypocrite. Think about it, like, well, how come we teach them this and we're not doing it ourselves?
Yeah.
So to that point, like, the part I don't quite get is like, okay, after 20 times, after 25 times, when do you escalate your reaction to the kid?
When is enough is enough.
Yeah.
No, you can.
25?
No, because you can escalate. Yeah. What I'm saying is, if you say that if you do A, then B is going to happen, then you have to do B. Yeah. Right? Yeah. You can't have A happen and then you just, you know what, I'm so tired, I'm not going to do B anymore. But you can go even further, right? So like you can say, if you want to put an end to it, you can put like a more stringent consequence. You could go to your room, okay? Like I told you, you know, share with your sister, and I told you 5 times, go to your room, okay? So at that point, like, you don't have to deal with the issue anymore because I've given you a stronger consequence, a consequence that's going to essentially end the situation, right? But, you know, like there are some things we do, like, you give them a no birthday party or, you know, stuff like that. It's like, you know, well, we're going to cancel our vacation, you know, like yeah. So that kind of thing is, you know, we know inside that we're not going to do it, but we know it scares them, and we're hoping that it's going to be scary enough to where they're going to, like, be in line.
Call your bluff.
Yeah. So one, give consequences that are realistic, and 2, never like not implement the consequence when we say that we are going to do it. Okay, but the consequence can get worse, but it can't get less. So we can say, okay, you've already broken this 5 times. If you do this again, now it's going to be this, you know, something even more strict that maybe is going to end, like, go to your room or go to timeout or whatever it is, you know. But don't let them feel like they're eventually going to get away with it if they keep pushing too much, because kids are much more patient than us. Yeah. Kids love to keep trying the same thing again and again and again. They love reading the same books again and again and again, seeing the same movies again and again and again, where we are, like, so bored, like, how are you doing it? But kids have a different sense of, I'm just going to keep trying and keep doing it. And to them, it's, like, always, like, fun and new and different, right? So being, like, when he speaks about patience, he speaks of it in that context of, I have to intervene effectively, repeatedly. Like, that's patience, right? As long as our child continues to struggle, there's stability in that. And eventually when our kids realize that we are very stable, then they might not even push the boundaries as much, because they know, without even having tried it, that if we tell them this is going to happen, then it's definitely going to happen.
Also something to add, the fact that they keep repeating the same mistake and keep correcting them. Maybe we should stop and think, are the way we're correcting them is the right way? Maybe that's why they're not responding to it. So changing, I mean, we're adults, we're creative, we can move things around or tell them in a different way or make the consequence look different to them. Maybe they would be more acceptance to it.
That's true.
But they like to do things again and again and again.
I believe that's because their mind is growing up every day. So
And
every day they take the correction in a new way.
Yeah,
That's what I noticed with my children. Like I go with the same way, and I found, like, every day, next time I'm doing correction for a part.
Right.
And the part from the previous is already fixed.
Right.
Yeah. So. It's like their mind's growing every day and take it in a different mean every way.
Yeah, like you can
every time.
Like when a 3-year-old tell them yucky, you can't say that to a 5-year-old. They're not gonna take it the same way, you know.
You're gonna laugh at it.
Yeah. It's just the vocabulary, the Everything is different.
Yeah, to that point, the book talks about like these kids just want to connect to you, and they want to like that's why they might be acting out because they'll give them a hug.
Mhm.
You need a hug. We try that. It's still a little tough.
That's a good hug.
Yeah.
Same thing like we are when we
They think we're silly.
and when
Like,
our services we look at you like
Yeah.
I used to do this one.
Yeah. They're kind of like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, I was coming to tease you and get on your nerves, and now you're smiling to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. So.
This is the last question. As parents, what is our role in helping them to achieve these goals? Okay, and he focuses on two primary things. Okay, he says one is that we shouldn't judge them, and maybe that sounds weird to us as parents. Like, in what way do we judge our kids? Okay, and isn't our job to judge our kids? He says we should not judge our children when they misbehave. They are not here to make us proud. We are here to help them grow no matter how they behave, right? This goes back a little bit to the whole embarrassing thing, right? I'm not here to put my child as, like, look at my child. He is like the product of my raising, and he is so wonderful, and he reflects on me, and everyone that sees him, now they're going to see, wow, you're such a great parent, and you're so responsible, and all of that. Like, just like we wouldn't judge other people, like sometimes we look at our kids and we think about them as like, how are you doing this? Like we feel so like toward them like they're just bad, right? They are bad. And we look at them. Maybe we don't say that to them, but inside it's like he's just bad. Like he's not doing good, right? But think about like the world that they live in is so different from our world. They live in this world where they don't have the same priorities, the same understanding, the same knowledge, the same capabilities as we have. And sometimes we might be placing on them like expectations that are way too high or difficult for them. It doesn't mean that we don't put rules, but at the same time, we should expect that those rules are going to be broken a lot, maybe for years, until finally they're able to follow those rules on their own without making mistakes. Right? So just because we place a rule doesn't mean that gives the child the ability to follow the rule. Right? Those are different things. When we place a rule, it's because that rule should be supporting the long-term goal. Meaning what? That by following this rule, we develop good habits, we develop an understanding of right and wrong, and that's what I want you to grow into it. Okay? But just because I've said the rule doesn't mean that now you have the ability to follow the rule. Actually, in the book of Romans, St. Paul, he speaks about this. He says the law is like the rules of God. God gave us the law. But he says in the law, there is no power to follow the law. Actually, what is it that the law did? When God gave the law to the people couldn't follow the law. All it did was made them realize, and the purpose of the law was for them to realize that they were sinners. To make them to realize that they were weak. To make them realize that I can't follow the law. When there are no rules, I don't have any sense of my weakness, right? Because there is no right and wrong, so I have no gauge by which to measure whether I'm doing right or wrong. But when there's a rule, and now I find myself trying to follow the rule and failing, then that shows me my weakness. It shows me that I am weak. The same is true with our kids. We place for them rules that to us seem trivial and easy. Right? But because we're adults and because we've mastered these rules, and to us these rules are so obvious and so easy to do. But for our children, it's like when God comes and tells us, do not lust, do not judge, do not envy, do not gossip, do not do these things. Just because God says that to us, does that mean that we follow all this stuff perfectly without failing? No. So just as we fail in the adult rules that God gives us, we should expect that our children are going to fail in these kid rules that we give them because they're weak, because they're human beings. They're sinners, just like we are sinners. So just as, God tells us don't judge others like adults, we also don't judge our own children and say, I'm judging you because you're not even able to do this like simple thing. So we put a rule with the understanding that it might take a long time for our children to grow to meet this rule. Or maybe the rule is too difficult. Like maybe we need to make the rule a little less. Something that will make them feel success, right? Because one of the biggest issues is if we put a rule that my child can never do for like 6 months, okay, my child is going to always keep feeling there's something bad with me. There's something wrong with me. Mom and dad always tell me that I'm bad because I can't do it. Maybe I have to put a rule that's, less, something they can do some of the time at least, so that we give them an opportunity for us to praise them. Wow, you did such a good job today. And that might make them motivated to do it more. And then once they get to that level where they've mastered that, then I go a little step further and say, okay, now we're going to do this. You know, those kind of things help us and help them. We feel like they're progressing, they feel that they're progressing, and so on. So we shouldn't jump to the end and say, yes, ideally we want you to do this, but maybe you can't get there yet. And then he says what? Don't rescue them from their struggles. He says, if we love our children, we walk with them through the struggles, we don't remove the struggles. Okay, like we were saying at the beginning, right? We want them to, you know, essentially like have to deal with the consequences of their decisions and of their struggles. Like, so for instance, I'm teaching my child to, put on their clothes by themselves, let's say, something at their level. And they don't know how to do this, and they've never done it before, but I want you to learn. So they might start crying, and they don't know what to do, and like whatever. I can't like immediately jump and say, okay, you know what? I'm going to just do it for you, okay? It doesn't mean that we're going to expect them to do it all the first time, but we want them to at least try. We want them to see that it's like we're not going to just jump in and save you from this difficult situation. The first moment you begin to cry, the first moment you ask for help, the first moment, because we want to teach you and instill in you a principle that is for your good. We want you to learn to do this on your own. So it takes time, it takes effort, but we have to always think, I am not here to save my children from every struggle, from every pain, from everything. This is something you're going to have to do and learn on your own. And I shouldn't feel like I'm the one that's going to sweep in and save you all the time. Any comments or questions about anything we've talked about?